Hi, this is Brin from bigender.net. Since it's Transgender Awareness Week, apparently, I thought I'd post more videos than just the one a week that I was intending, or one every 2 weeks. And since it is Transgender Awareness Week, I thought I might talk a little bit about how I became aware that I'm trans. I think I touched on it a little bit in my previous video, and I know one of the first times I tried recording that one, it went like 25 minutes or something because I didn't have a timer, but now I have one on my screen so I can see that I don't go over and I don't have to do any weird edits or anything, hopefully. Real quick, speaking of my last video, I did want to say one thing. I mentioned that when I gave my grandfather my coming out letter, that he made a point of telling me that he would much rather that I hadn't. Despite my need to come out, or feeling like I needed to come out to him, he would rather I hadn't. It makes it sound like he was rejecting, like it was a big rejection. It wasn't. He just wasn't the kind of guy who liked to have that information in his life. I think he probably thought that it was something that was personal to me that shouldn't be shared with anyone, not just him. But he and I had a really great relationship up until the day he died. So I want to make sure it didn't sound like I was saying that he, absented himself from my life, because that wasn't the case, and I don't want to paint an unfair picture of someone I think is a really great man. Okay, so how I became aware I was trans. Sort of in the long ago, in the before times, before there was internet, it was really hard to get information that was somewhat reliable about things that weren't heteronormative, and especially white heteronormative. But when I was like 6 or so, so my mom died when I was 3. So growing up, it was my dad, my brother, and I. So I didn't really have a woman in my house all the time. We briefly lived with my aunt, but after that, it was just the 3 of us, and so it was very masculine, very male-centric, and, it is what it is. I'm not trying to slight my dad, because another great guy, but, I didn't really have that constant female presence in my life. But all my cousins were girls. So when my brother and I weren't in school, my dad would take us over to one of my aunt's house to stay during the day, and we'd play with my cousin, who's the same age as me. And we would play games, we'd play pretend games, etc. And every so often we'd play house, and I would end up playing a girl part. It never really took a whole lot of convincing. Like, once I realized that this was something that could be done, then I was always sort of ready to do that, and waiting for someone to suggest it. I didn't know why, though. It was very confusing, because I knew that my brother didn't really want to, and his protests were a little more heartfelt than mine. But sometimes these games would involve dressing up in my cousin's clothes or dresses and things like that, which was terribly exciting to me. In a way that's very difficult to explain, because these feelings are coming from someone who's like 6. So it wasn't dirty or anything. It just sort of felt natural, good. Like, when you get all prettied up and you feel like you're looking good or feeling right, then, that's kind of how it felt. But of course I was very ashamed of it, because I knew that that's not what boys did, and I didn't know what happened to boys who didn't who did what boys weren't supposed to do, and I didn't want to find out. My cousin, bless her heart, kept my secret for a long, long time. So thank you. So I'm outing that now. Sorry. So I grew up knowing that I enjoyed looking like a girl and playing a girl role, or living as a girl. But I didn't, I sort of denied it all the time to myself and anybody else, because I didn't know that was something that people did. I thought I was alone. I thought I was kind of a freak. And so as I got older, I would squirrel away clothes and hide them and, dress up in my room and, just be absolutely terrified that someone would come in and catch me. And I thought that there was something wrong with me, because I didn't want to be a girl all the time. I was quite happy being a boy. I liked doing boy things. I liked, I liked when people used male pronouns with me, or, used my boy name. It never really triggered anything that was painful most of the time. Every so often, though, I have androgynous features, and I kind of had the same face I've had since I was in kindergarten, so just a little shorter. Every so often, my hair would get longer, and people would mistake me for a girl, and so they'd say, "Oh, how pretty," or "she" and "her," and "What's your name, darling?" Da da da. That felt really good too, and being recognized as a girl made me feel very validated somehow, but I didn't know I was seeking validation for it. So that's my childhood. Very confusing and very secretive and somewhat shameful. Move into my teen years, and I'm still squirreling away clothes and putting them on in my room and being very hidey. And then that's when puberty comes along, and I thought, since I wasn't doing what guy stuff was, it must mean I'm gay, but I really liked girls, so I didn't understand how that was working. So I thought I was, bad at being a boy and bad at being gay or straight too, and I didn't really have anyone I could talk to about it. And at the time, there was no internet. We're talking the early 90s here, and I mean, there is internet, but we're talking like CompuServe and Prodigy, and there's no World Wide Web yet. I didn't have any resources for information except for things like Jenny Jones and Jerry Springer and Maury Povich and Montel Williams and Oprah and Phil Donahue. And on all those shows, anytime there was somebody who was who wasn't gender normative, so a crossdresser or a transsexual or something else, it was always something that was trotted out to be pointed and laughed at. Especially on Springer and those kinds of like really sensational shows, it was always someone who almost looked like they were doing it for a joke, and everyone would laugh and they'd go crazy on the stage and throw chairs and things. And I thought that was the only way that the trans people existed, and I came to the conclusion that you can only be a crossdresser, transvestite, or a transsexual. And a transsexual, you have to get all the perks taken off and, do all the things. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to live full-time as a woman. I didn't want to have any surgeries or anything, so clearly I was a crossdresser. Except I still thought you had to be kind of crazy to do it. And then the first year after I got out of college, my ex-girlfriend, who would become my fiance, then wife, then ex-wife, lent me her tape of Eddie Izzard's Dress to Kill. And she said, this guy is hysterical, and you have to be smart to get his humor, and he's funny, and he just sort of, riffs, and, he's frenetic, and oh, by the way, he's a crossdresser, and, he looks really kind of good. And I was like, this is something that's okay? Like, how does that work? So I watched it, and he says things like, I'm more of an executive transvestite, or an action transvestite, not a fucking weirdo transvestite. And, you know, it sort of dawned on me, here's this guy who's very smart, very capable, very successful, and he's wearing women's clothing, and, you know, makeup, and looking good, and heels no less, and, you know, I was like, oh my god, it's a revelation. Up to this point, I'd been sort of identifying as a crossdresser. I'd even come out to a couple of people, but I didn't really know what it meant. So, oh wow, 10.5 minutes already. Gonna have to speed it up, I think. So, I got engaged and came out to my fiance as a crossdresser. It's the backwards order. You're supposed to come out and then you can propose. I've apologized already for that. Anyway, I thought it was just the clothes. At this point, I had been able to get online a little bit and talk to some other crossdressers and sort of hear their stories. And, you know, they're heterosexual crossdressers. That's like a subcategory of trans. And that's the one that seemed to fit because I didn't know there was anything that wasn't crossdresser or transsexual. So I took that one, and that's how I came out to her. And I mentioned this in my coming out video that I came out wrong the first time because I came out too soon and didn't really fit. But as I listened to these tales, these stories, and I said this before too, I realized that I didn't fit in with their story. I didn't have the same experiences they did. I really did feel like a woman, but only sometimes. And again, I got to BC Holmes' page, and I apologize, the lighting and the focus is a little screwy, but I've already gotten comments on atrocious lighting. Anyway, so I started to put together this whole idea that, or come to learn about this whole idea that gender is a spectrum and not a binary and not just 2 points on a line. And there's a lot of ways to express gender. And I realized that, yeah, I'm a woman and I'm still a man. Crossdressers tend to be very concrete in how in cementing their identity as male exclusively and only enjoying the clothing and the presentation and the, you know, some of the attention that goes along with that, but not actually feeling like a woman. And that didn't fit for me. So, you know, I hit on this term bigender, and over the years I found out that there's other people that are like this. But it took me a long time to realize that, you know, the feelings I was feeling was it was that joy of being recognized as a woman. And I got that joy when I recognized myself as a female. And that's what really finally cemented it for me, was when I realized that I really do want to interact with the world as a woman because that's how I feel. That's who I am inside. Partly because I'm also a boy. I'm still the guy that grew up. And it took a really long time for me to be able to synthesize those and put them all together and sort of be satisfied with the ambiguity of it all. So, and I guess that's kind of my story. It's fairly common, I guess. There's a big shame cycle. It took me a long time to break the shame cycle. I did have to go to therapy. And I resisted for a very long time because I thought that if I couldn't solve the problem on my own, then I didn't deserve to, or it was insoluble. And therapy helped me a great deal. My therapist really gave me helped shine light on the path that I needed to follow, that I needed to do the work on myself. And so I finally put it all together, and here I am. This is me. So that's how I became aware of being trans. And I'm out of time. Good night. Send me notes.